The meteor shower was supposed to be the highlight of Dr. Elias Mercer's month. Alone in his mountain observatory, miles from the nearest town, he had positioned his instruments perfectly, ready to document the celestial event that had drawn his focus for weeks. Elias preferred the company of stars to people, had done so since his wife's passing 3 years ago, and tonight's Perseid shower promised to be spectacular. What he hadn't anticipated was the sound of something heavy collapsing against his front door just as the first meteor streaked across the sky. What the hell? Elias muttered, reluctantly pulling away from his telescope. The observatory's living quarters were sparse but functional, and it took him only moments to reach the entrance. When he opened the door, his scientific mind struggled to process what he saw. A woman lay crumpled on his doorstep, her skin an impossible shade of pale blue, with delicate, luminescent patterns tracing her exposed arms. She wore what looked like a flight suit of some material he couldn't identify, singed at the edges. For a terrifying moment, he thought she wasn't breathing. "Hello? Can you hear me?" Elias knelt beside her, medical training from his military days kicking in as he checked for a pulse. It was there, but rapid and irregular. Her skin felt cool to the touch, but not cold, closer to the temperature of a reptile than a human. Logic told him to call for help, but the nearest emergency services were an hour away, and something about the woman's otherworldly appearance made him hesitate. Instead, he carefully lifted her surprisingly light form and carried her inside to his spare room. Under the bright lights, her appearance was even more startling. What he had taken for tattoos were actually intricate patterns beneath her skin that seemed to pulse with a faint, bluish glow. Her features were almost human: high cheekbones, a straight nose, full lips, but slightly elongated, giving her an ethereal quality. As Elias cleaned a wound on her forehead, her eyes snapped open. They were violet, with no visible pupils, just iridescent pools that reminded him of nebulae viewed through his most powerful telescope. She gasped, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. "Easy," he said, his voice gentle despite his shock. "You're safe." She spoke rapidly in a language unlike anything he'd ever heard, melodic and complex, with sounds that seemed to overlap. Her expression was urgent, fearful, as she pointed toward the sky. "I don't understand," Elias admitted. "But you're hurt. Let me help you." The woman's grip on his wrist loosened, her eyes scanning his face with an intensity that made him feel transparent. Finally, she nodded once, the gesture unmistakably human despite everything else about her that wasn't. Throughout the night, as meteors continued their silent journey across the sky outside, Elias monitored his unexpected guest. He applied antiseptic to her wounds, offered water, which she examined carefully before drinking, and tried unsuccessfully to communicate. Each time he approached the phone to call for help, something stopped him. By morning, as the sun crept over the mountains, the woman was sitting up, studying Elias's books with apparent fascination. When he entered the room with a tray of food, she looked up and deliberately touched her chest. "Nova," she said clearly, the first recognizable word she'd spoken. Elias paused, then pointed to himself. "Elias." Nova's lips curved into a smile, and the markings on her skin pulsed brighter for a moment. Elias knew his life had irrevocably changed, not by the meteor shower he'd planned to observe, but by the star that had fallen directly to his doorstep. For 3 days, Elias's observatory became a classroom. Nova proved to be an astonishingly quick study, absorbing English vocabulary and syntax at a rate that defied explanation. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin seemed to pulse more vibrantly whenever she mastered a new concept. "Stars," she said on the 4th morning, pointing to a chart on Elias's wall. "Your understanding is primitive." Elias laughed despite himself. "Is that so? And I suppose you have better star charts where you come from." Nova's expression grew somber. We had better." She touched a constellation on the map. "My home was there. Now gone." The gravity of her statement silenced Elias. He'd suspected she wasn't human, of course, but hearing confirmation sent a shiver through him. "What happened?" "Death came from void between stars," she said, her newly acquired vocabulary struggling to convey complex ideas. "My people saw it coming. Sent warnings. I carried data." She tapped her temple. "Here. You're a messenger," Elias realized. "But why come to my door? This observatory isn't even on most maps." Nova's violet eyes flickered with something like embarrassment. "Landing errors. Ship damaged. You were not planned, Elias. But you helped when others might fear." Something warm unfurled in Elias's chest at her words. For years after losing his wife to cancer, he had retreated from human connection, finding comfort in the cold precision of astronomical data. Now this being from another world was awakening feelings he'd thought long dead. As days passed, Nova adapted to Earth's environment with mixed success. Sunlight caused her skin to develop painful blisters, forcing her to stay indoors during daylight hours. Certain foods made her violently ill. But she delighted in rain, standing by the window during storms, watching lightning with childlike wonder. "Your world has much beauty," she told him one evening as they shared dinner. Nova had fashioned a garment from one of his old shirts, cinched at the waist with a belt. The sight of her in his clothes stirred something primal in him that he fought to suppress. "What will you do now?" he asked. "If your ship is damaged." "Must complete mission," she said firmly. "Others will come looking." "For data." "For me." She hesitated, then reached across the table to touch his hand. "Not all seekers are friends." The contact sent electricity through him. Her skin was warmer now, adapting to Earth's temperatures, and the patterns beneath pulsed gently where their flesh met. "I don't want you to go," Elias admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. "I don't want to leave," she replied, her command of English improving by the hour. "But Earth in danger. Same danger that took my world." That night, Elias lay awake, thinking about Nova sleeping in the next room. He'd lived in isolation by choice, convinced his capacity for connection had died with his wife. Now this cosmic refugee had crashed into his life, awakening not just his heart, but his sense of purpose. In the quiet darkness, Elias made his decision. Whatever danger Nova was fleeing, whatever threat she was warning about, he would help her. Not just for Earth's sake, but for his own, for the chance to feel alive again. Outside, unseen by either of them, a black vehicle with tinted windows pulled up at the base of the mountain road leading to the observatory. The first sign of trouble came when Elias's internet connection failed. Then his phone. Isolated by nature, the observatory suddenly felt like a trap. "Someone is watching," Nova said, her now fluent English tinged with an accent that sounded vaguely Scandinavian. She stood by the window, careful to stay out of direct sunlight, eyes fixed on the road below. "They know I'm here." "How could they?" Elias asked, joining her at the window. "No one even knows this place exists except the university that funds my research." Nova turned to him, her violet eyes grave. "The data I carry, it's not just about the cosmic threat. It's also technology. Valuable beyond measure." She touched the glowing patterns on her arm. "My people encoded it into my genetic structure. I am the message." The intimacy of the moment was broken by the distant sound of an engine. Elias grabbed his binoculars and spotted the black SUV winding up the mountain road. "We need to leave. Now." He began gathering essentials, water, food, his laptop with astronomical data. "There's a service road behind the observatory. We can take my Jeep." Nova moved with fluid efficiency, helping him pack. When their hands brushed, the contact lingered longer than necessary. In the urgency of escape, something shifted between them. The power cut out just as they were preparing to leave. Standing in sudden darkness, Elias felt Nova's presence before he saw her, a faint luminescence from her skin patterns providing the only light. "They're trying to trap us," she whispered, suddenly very close. "Who are they?" Elias asked, his heart pounding from both fear and proximity. "Anyone who wants power. The knowledge I carry." Her voice caught. "Elias, I'm sorry I brought this to your door." He found her face in the dim glow, cupping her cheek with his palm. "I'm not." Their first kiss tasted of stardust and adrenaline, her lips cool against his, the luminescent patterns on her skin flaring brighter in response to the contact. For a moment, the danger outside ceased to exist. There was only Nova, alien, and yet somehow exactly what he'd been missing without knowing it. The sound of breaking glass from the front of the observatory shattered the moment. "This way," Elias whispered, leading her by hand through the darkened hallways he knew by heart. They slipped out through a maintenance entrance just as flashlight beams swept the main building. The night air was cold, the sky above brilliant with stars that, Elias now knew, had witnessed the destruction of Nova's world and might soon see the same fate befall Earth. In the Jeep, racing down the rough service road with headlights off, guided only by moonlight, Elias glanced at Nova. The woman from the stars had crashed into his isolated life and set it ablaze. Now they were fugitives together, bound by a shared purpose and something deeper neither had expected to find. "Where do we go?" he asked. Nova looked up at the night sky, then back at him. "North. Always north. There's a place where stars speak clearly. That's where I can transmit the warning." Elias nodded, tightening his grip on the steering wheel. The life he had built after tragedy, safe, predictable, lonely, was now behind him. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the strange new territory of loving someone not of his world.